She lost everything, her home, her peace, even her husband's memory. All because of one corrupt HOA president who thought she could silence a widow. But she was wrong. What started as a simple property dispute became a storm of lies, greed, and betrayal, a nightmare that spread through the entire neighborhood. They mocked her. They evicted her. They thought she would disappear quietly. But months later, when the police sirens echoed through the same streets that once humiliated her, they realized the truth. The widow hadn't been broken. She was just getting started. This is the story of Margaret Lane, the woman who brought down an entire HOA from the shadows. A story of betrayal, power, and ultimate revenge. The perfect home, the perfect lie. The cul-de-sac looked like paradise from a distance. Manicured lawns, shining mailboxes, and pastel-painted houses glowing under the morning sun. But behind the smiles and garden fences of Maple Grove community, something rotten was growing for years. People whispered about the Homeowners Association, the HOA, and its president, Martha Green, a woman with a perfect smile and an iron heart. She ruled the neighborhood like a queen, controlling everything from paint colors to porch decorations. No one crossed her, until Evelyn Clark arrived. Evelyn had just lost her husband, Michael. After 30 years of marriage, cancer had taken him, and she was left with a small insurance payout and an ocean of silence. Maple Grove was supposed to be her new beginning, a peaceful home where she could rebuild her life. She bought a cozy corner house with white shutters and a small rose garden. She planted every rose herself, each one a tribute to her late husband. At first, the neighborhood welcomed her. People smiled. Martha even brought her cookies. But within a week, the letters began. The first one was polite. Your fence color is not HOA approved. Please repaint within 10 days. The second was colder. Your rose bushes exceed the allowed height. By the third, Evelyn started to understand. This wasn't about rules. It was personal. Martha had decided Evelyn didn't belong. Soon, the fines began piling up. $100, then $500. Then $1,000. Evelyn tried to reason with the HOA office, but every email went unanswered. When she tried to attend a meeting, they forgot to inform her of the date. Weeks turned into months, and the harassment grew crueler. Anonymous complaints about her unkept yard, notices about unauthorized flower species. Someone even scratched her car. The piece she'd bought was crumbling, one letter at a time. Then one morning, Evelyn found a notice taped to her door. Foreclosure due to unpaid HOA fees. Her hands trembled. They were trying to take her house, her husband's memory, everything. She went to Martha's office, desperate. But Martha only smiled that same polished smile. It's nothing personal, dear. Rules are rules. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her living room, surrounded by framed photos of Michael. She remembered his last words. Don't let anyone take what's yours. Tears fell quietly, but something inside her shifted. The pain hardened into something cold. For the first time since Michael's death, Evelyn felt alive, not with grief, but with purpose. She began researching Martha. Old records, public filings, property documents. What she found stunned her. Martha's name appeared on multiple properties, houses she'd acquired after HOA foreclosures. Dozens of widows, single parents, and retirees had lost their homes in the same rule violations. It wasn't about the HOA, it was a scam. A system of control and theft, hiding behind community rules, and Evelyn was their next target. That night, she made a promise. Not to her husband's memory, but to herself. She would expose Martha Green. She would take back what was hers. And she would make her pay. She began planning, quietly, patiently. The first step was understanding the system. She attended meetings undercover, posing as a concerned neighbor. She watched how Martha manipulated votes, forged complaints, and silenced opposition. But Evelyn wasn't alone for long. One day, while walking past the mailbox, an old man named Tom Avery stopped her. "You're the new widow, right?" he asked. His eyes were tired but kind. "You're not the first she's done this to." That night, Tom told her everything. How Martha used HOA power to pressure homeowners, how she bought their houses at auction, and how she'd silenced anyone who tried to fight back. Evelyn's resolve hardened like steel. This wasn't just about her home anymore. It was about justice for everyone Martha had destroyed. But justice, she realized, wouldn't come easy. Martha had friends, police, lawyers, even real estate connections. She had money, power, and reputation. Evelyn had only one weapon, her mind. So she began gathering proof, screenshots, meeting recordings, and hidden camera footage. Every night, she pieced together Martha's web of lies, but the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Strange cars started parking outside her house. Her mail went missing. Her tires were slashed. One evening, as she returned home, she found her front door slightly open. Inside, the living room lights flickered. Someone had been there. On her table was a note. No signature, just 5 words. Stop digging or you're next. Evelyn didn't call the police. She simply burned the note, watching the paper curl into ashes. The fear was real, but the fire inside her was stronger. The widow was done grieving. Now she was hunting, and in the silent, perfect streets of Maple Grove, something far darker than HOA rules was about to unfold. The secret behind the HOA files. The morning after the break-in, Evelyn barely slept. The sun rose over Maple Grove, but the neighborhood didn't feel like home anymore. The quiet hum of sprinklers, the chirping birds, everything now sounded like a warning. She sat at her kitchen table, sipping black coffee, eyes fixed on the burned edges of the note she had turned to ash the night before. Whoever left it wanted her scared. But all it did was confirm what she already knew. She was getting close. Over the following week, Evelyn's investigation deepened. She noticed something strange. The HOA's official website listed only 7 members, but when she attended meetings, she saw more than a dozen people sitting at the front table, faces she didn't recognize, names that didn't appear anywhere. Martha called them advisors, but none of them were registered. Evelyn began to suspect that these advisors weren't real members. They were business partners. Maybe investors in Martha's hidden empire. She needed proof. Late one night, Evelyn parked her car down the street from the HOA office, a small beige building beside the community park. She waited until the streetlights flickered and the neighborhood fell silent. Then she put on gloves, tucked her hair into a cap, and slipped out into the night. The office wasn't heavily secured. Martha never thought anyone would dare break in. Evelyn picked the back lock with a small pin she'd found in Michael's old toolbox. The door creaked open, revealing a room lined with filing cabinets and dusty binders. The air smelled of paper and secrets. She found Martha's private folder drawer. Confidential, HOA president only. Inside were files marked evictions, foreclosures, and property transfers. Evelyn's heart pounded as she flipped through the pages. Every document followed the same pattern: false violations, unpaid fines, foreclosure notices, and then sale records signed by Martha herself. Each home went to a company called MG Holdings, LLC. Her hands froze. MG, Martha Green. Evelyn photographed every document with her phone. Dozens of victims. Every one of them had been forced out under HOA regulation breaches. But as she turned another page, she saw something that chilled her, a file with her name on it. Evelyn Clark, foreclosure confirmed. Dated 2 days from now. She had 48 hours before her home, Michael's home, would be auctioned off. Panic surged through her chest, but beneath it burned something hotter. Rage. She quietly packed the files, locked the office behind her, and drove home. The night air was heavy with storm clouds. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. They were going to take everything. But now she had the evidence. The next morning, Evelyn met with Tom Avery again. They sat in the corner of a small diner outside Maple Grove, away from curious eyes. She showed him the photos. Tom's face darkened. "I knew it," he whispered. "She's been flipping houses for years. She takes them cheap, sells them to developers. Evelyn asked if others might join her fight. Tom nodded. There are more like us, people she's ruined. But most are scared. Martha has connections in City Hall. She gets away with everything. Evelyn leaned back, eyes cold. Not this time. She created a digital folder that night, the HOA files, containing every piece of proof. She sent encrypted copies to Tom and 2 other former residents who had reached out anonymously. Then, she contacted a journalist, a small-town reporter named Claire Mitchell, who had once covered HOA corruption cases. Evelyn didn't give her name at first, only the documents. Claire replied within an hour. If this is real, it's the biggest HOA fraud I've ever seen. For the first time, Evelyn felt like she wasn't fighting alone, but Martha wasn't blind. 2 days later, Evelyn returned home to find 2 police cars in her driveway. Officers were hammering a foreclosure sign into her front yard. Martha stood nearby, her manicured hands clasped, smiling like a queen addressing her subjects. "Mrs. Clark," she said sweetly, "you've had months to comply. The auction is final." Evelyn didn't argue. She just stared, silent, watching, calculating. Martha mistook the silence for defeat. She turned to the officers. "Proceed." As the red and white foreclosure notice went up, Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes, not of grief, but fury. When Martha left, Evelyn walked inside, locked the door, and opened her laptop. She uploaded the HOA files to every online platform she could, news outlets, public servers, and social media. Within hours, the story exploded. HOA president accused of massive property fraud lit up local news headlines. Her photos, her documents, every detail, all over the internet. But Martha struck back fast. The next morning, Evelyn's internet was cut off. Her electricity flickered. Anonymous letters filled her mailbox, calling her a liar and a thief. Still, she didn't stop. When the first journalist showed up at Maple Grove's gate asking questions, the entire neighborhood began to whisper. Martha tried to play innocent. "It's all fake, a widow's delusion." But Evelyn had one more card left. Hidden inside the files she'd stolen was an audio recording from a private HOA meeting. Martha's voice was unmistakable, laughing as she said, "These widows don't even read the fine print. I take their houses before they even realize what happened." The journalist published the recording. It spread faster than wildfire. By evening, TV vans surrounded Maple Grove, police cars parked outside Martha's home. Neighbors who once feared her now gathered at their windows, watching as the queen of the HOA began to crumble. But Evelyn didn't celebrate. She sat quietly in her dark living room, surrounded by the soft glow of candles, because she knew Martha wasn't done yet. When you destroy a woman like Martha, green, one who has built her life on power and control, she doesn't disappear quietly. She fights back, and that night, as thunder rolled in and lightning flashed across the street, Evelyn noticed a black SUV parked near her driveway. Engine running, headlights off. Her phone buzzed with a new email. No sender, no subject. Just a single image, a photo of her house taken that very moment from outside. Then another message appeared beneath it. "You should have stopped when you had the chance." Evelyn closed the blinds and locked every door. The storm raged outside, and in the distance the SUV drove away slowly, as if promising it would return. Evelyn wasn't scared. She was ready, because now, this wasn't just about revenge. It was war. The storm that shook Maple Grove. Rain poured over Maple Grove like the sky itself wanted to wash away the neighborhood's sins. The perfect lawns flooded, white fences bent under the wind, and thunder cracked through the night. Inside her dimly lit house, Evelyn Clark watched the storm from behind closed blinds. Every flash of lightning illuminated her reflection in the glass, a tired face, eyes hollow but fierce. She wasn't the same woman who had moved here months ago. The grief was gone. Only fire remained. Outside, the black SUV was gone, but the fear it left behind lingered. Evelyn sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and glowing screens. The HOA scandal had gone viral, but the chaos it unleashed was far from over. The local police had launched an investigation, but she knew how these things worked. Slow, cautious, political. And Martha had friends in every department. Still, cracks were forming. By morning, the news had reached national outlets. Reporters camped outside the gated entrance of Maple Grove, their cameras turning the quiet street into a battlefield of flashing lights. Neighbors who had once adored Martha now whispered behind curtains. The Queen's crown was slipping. But Martha Green wasn't done. At exactly 9 a.m., Evelyn received a letter, delivered by hand, not mail. No return address. Inside was a single legal document stamped with bold letters, defamation lawsuit. Martha was suing her for public slander and reputational damage. Evelyn stared at the page, speechless. It was brilliant, evil but brilliant. If Martha could turn the narrative around, she might regain control before the police could act. That afternoon, a local TV reporter knocked on Evelyn's door asking for an interview. Evelyn agreed, but only if they broadcast it live. As cameras rolled, she stood in her living room, surrounded by photographs of her late husband. Her voice was calm, steady. "This isn't about me," she said. "This is about every person who lost their home because of greed hiding behind community rules." The segment aired that night, and it struck a chord across the country. Thousands of viewers shared her story. Other victims from different states began contacting her, sending their own HOA horror stories. The widow had become a symbol, not just of loss, but of resistance. But fame came at a price. 3 days later, someone broke into her car. The glove compartment was ripped open, her USB drives missing. That same night, Tom Avery's garage caught fire. The flames spread quickly, burning everything he'd stored, including his copies of the HOA files. The message was clear. Martha was cleaning up. When Evelyn went to check on Tom, he stood in the rain, staring at the ashes. "She'll stop at nothing," he muttered. "You need to leave before she turns this place into your grave," but Evelyn shook her head. "I won't run. She took my peace. She took my home. I'll take everything she built." Back at her house, Evelyn realized something chilling. The lawsuit wasn't Martha's real weapon. It was a distraction. While Evelyn was focused on defending herself legally, Martha was working to erase every trace of her crimes. Evelyn opened her laptop and logged into the public record system again. Her stomach dropped. Half the files she'd uploaded online were gone, flagged for privacy violations and legal review. Someone with high-level access was removing the evidence from public view. She needed a backup, fast. Evelyn reached out to Claire Mitchell, the journalist who first helped her. Claire answered on the first ring. "Evelyn, I've been trying to reach you. Something's wrong. Our servers were hit last night. Someone's wiping every HOA-related file we published. Can you trace it?" Evelyn asked. "There's a VPN, but the IP address leads to the county clerk's office." "That's government." Evelyn froze. It was worse than she thought. Martha's web extended far beyond Maple Grove. That night, the storm outside grew louder, sheets of rain pounding against the glass. Evelyn paced the living room, mind racing. She needed a new strategy. She couldn't fight Martha through the courts or media anymore. She had to go deeper. In Michael's old drawer, she found his dusty camcorder. It still worked. She attached it near her window, facing the street. Then another one in the hallway, hidden behind a vase. She started recording everything. She also began digging into MG Holdings LLC again, tracing its financial trail. After hours of searching, she found a link to a bigger company, Blue Pine Investments, headquartered 2 towns away. Their CEO? Jonathan Green, Martha's husband. The revelation hit her like a lightning strike. It wasn't just a personal scam. It was an organized operation. Martha used the HOA to take homes, and Jonathan's firm flipped them for profit. A perfect, legal-looking cycle of theft. The storm outside seemed to echo the chaos inside her mind. Thunder rolled, shaking the walls. Suddenly, a loud bang. The sound came from her back door. Evelyn's heart stopped. She grabbed her phone, opened the camera feed. The back porch light was swinging wildly. Then she saw it. A shadow moving near the fence line. Another crash. Glass shattered in the kitchen. Evelyn ducked behind the sofa, breathing hard. The intruder moved quickly, methodically. She couldn't see his face, only dark clothes and gloves. He wasn't there to steal. He was there to silence. The intruder reached her office. Papers flew. Drawers slammed. He took her hard drives. Then, just as suddenly as he came, he left. Evelyn waited in silence, the storm masking every sound. When she finally stood, the house was a mess. Shattered glass, scattered papers, and her evidence gone. But as she went to check the hallway, her eyes widened. The vase camera, still recording. She played the footage back immediately. The image was grainy but clear enough. The intruder's face was hidden until lightning flashed through the window. For half a second, it lit up his features. It wasn't a stranger. It was a police officer, the same officer who had enforced her foreclosure notice. Evelyn leaned back, trembling, not with fear but realization. The system was completely rigged. Martha wasn't just powerful, she owned everyone around her, but that recording changed everything. It wasn't over yet. As the storm eased, Evelyn backed up the footage and hid the memory card in a small tin box buried beneath her rose garden. The only place Martha would never look. Tomorrow. She would expose not just Martha, but the entire network that helped her steal from others. The storm had passed, but the real war was just beginning, and this time, Evelyn wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting to destroy. The Queen falls. The morning after the storm, Maple Grove woke to a broken silence. Branches littered the streets, mailboxes leaned sideways, and the pristine neighborhood looked bruised for the first time in years. But the real damage wasn't in the streets. It was in the power that ruled them. Evelyn Clark stood at her window, staring at the police car that drove past her house. Not to protect her. To remind her, she now knew the truth. The system wasn't corrupted. It was owned. Martha Green had built her HOA not as a neighborhood association, but as a machine of quiet control. With her husband Jonathan's investment firm laundering the profits, their power reached far beyond Maple Grove. Evelyn had the proof, the hidden footage, the financial links, the forged signatures. But she also knew she couldn't rely on the police or courts anymore. If she wanted justice, she would have to burn everything Martha built. From the inside out, she started by creating a digital ghost of herself, new email, encrypted folders, and hidden cloud backups. Then she sent anonymous tips to major journalists and online whistleblower groups under a new alias, the Widow of Maple Grove. Her goal wasn't just to expose Martha, it was to make her infamous. By the end of that week, the internet had a new villain. Clips of Martha's HOA meetings, photos of her luxury cars, and leaked documents appeared everywhere. The HOA queen who stole from widows. The headline flooded social media. At first, Martha ignored it, confident her lawyers would silence the noise. But this wasn't a court battle anymore. It was public opinion. And public opinion had turned. Evelyn watched as the community she once feared began to fracture. Neighbors whispered openly now. Someone spray-painted thief on Martha's driveway. Another neighbor tore down the HOA banners. The perfect community was rotting from within. But Evelyn wasn't done. She took her next step quietly, through a single phone call. She reached out to Claire Mitchell again, giving her the new evidence, the camcorder footage showing the police officer breaking into her house. Claire's tone changed instantly. "Evelyn, this is huge. That's criminal collusion. I can get this on national TV." "Do it," Evelyn said. But not yet. She wanted the timing to be perfect, a public fall so big Martha couldn't recover. Meanwhile, Evelyn began setting traps. She sent Martha an anonymous letter, written in clean print. "I have the recording. I know about your husband's company. You have 1 week to resign, or I release everything." For the first time, Evelyn saw fear flicker behind Martha's perfect smile. At the next HOA meeting, the Queen of Maple Grove appeared tense, her voice sharper than usual. Her loyal advisors sat stiffly. Neighbors muttered under their breath. When the meeting ended, Evelyn watched from afar as Martha rushed into her car, clutching her purse like it held her entire empire. 3 days later, Evelyn's plan unfolded. A major news outlet aired the Widow of Maple Grove documentary, featuring clips, documents, and the hidden camcorder video. The broadcast exposed everything: the fraudulent foreclosures, the connection to Jonathan's company, the corrupt police officer, and even recordings of HOA intimidation tactics. It was devastating. The next morning, Martha's face was everywhere. Newspapers, TV, online thumbnails with bold text screaming, "Ho Queen caught! Corruption in the suburbs!" Reporters surrounded her mansion. Protesters gathered outside the HOA office demanding her resignation. Within hours, Martha Green's kingdom began collapsing. The city council suspended her HOA authority. The police chief, once her ally, launched an internal investigation to protect himself. Even Jonathan's company, Blue Pine Investments, went dark overnight, deleting their website and pulling their employees offline. Evelyn watched it all unfold from her living room. For the first time in months, she smiled, not with joy, but with relief. The woman who had stolen her home, mocked her grief, and ruled over her pain was finally falling. But the story wasn't over, because powerful people never go down quietly. That evening, Martha vanished. Reporters said she left the city before the arrest warrants were filed. Her husband Jonathan disappeared too. The Green mansion was found empty, clothes gone, computers wiped, bank accounts drained. Evelyn sat in the dark, the faint glow of her computer screen lighting her face. She knew they wouldn't stop until they silenced her completely. A new email arrived in her inbox. No sender. Just a short line. "You think you've won. This isn't over." She stared at the words for a long time. Then slowly, she deleted the message. Because deep down, she already knew. Martha might run, but she couldn't hide forever. The next week, police confirmed that Martha and Jonathan had fled to another state. But they left behind something far more valuable than their stolen homes: the paper trail Evelyn had uncovered. Using that evidence, the government froze their remaining assets and launched a full-scale federal investigation. Dozens of families who had lost their homes came forward. Lawsuits piled up against the HOA. Maple Grove was no longer a paradise. It was a crime scene. Evelyn's name remained anonymous, hidden behind her alias. But the world knew the widow of Maple Grove had exposed one of the biggest suburban frauds in state history. Still, inside her now quiet house, Evelyn didn't celebrate. She spent her evenings in the rose garden, where Michael's favorite flowers bloomed again after the storm. The soil beneath her feet hid the small tin box. The last copy of the evidence, untouched. Waiting because part of her knew that evil like Martha's doesn't die. It waits. It rebuilds. It returns. And if it ever did, Evelyn would be ready again. But that night, for the first time since her husband's death, she slept peacefully. The queen had fallen, and the widow had finally won. For now. Yet miles away, in a luxury condo by the coast, a woman with short blonde hair stood before a mirror, removing her diamond necklace. She smiled faintly at her reflection and whispered to herself, "You can't bury a queen." Then she placed a new ID card into her purse. The name read, Marianne Grant. The collapse. The storm that Margaret had set in motion was no longer invisible. It was gathering speed, feeding on whispers, emails, and quiet suspicions. For months, she had worked like a ghost, unseen but everywhere. Anonymous documents appeared in mailboxes. Photos of secret HOA meetings leaked online. A local blog began posting evidence of corruption, linking the president, Victoria Hale, to contractors who never finished projects but always collected full payments. The HOA board started to crack from within. Neighbors who once feared Victoria now avoided her entirely. The morning greetings that used to fill the manicured streets were replaced by silence. The once proud Cedar Lake Estates, the perfect image of suburban order, now felt poisoned, restless. Victoria could feel it. Every knock on her door, every car slowing near her house made her heart race. The woman who had built her reputation on control was now losing it, piece by piece. Late at night, she'd stand at her window, clutching a glass of wine, watching shadows move across the lawns she once ruled. Somewhere out there, someone was dismantling everything she had built, and she had no idea who it was. Margaret, however, watched it all unfold from the edges. Her revenge wasn't rage. It was patience, sharpened into precision. She had learned everything about Victoria's world. Her fake invoices, her hidden property bought with HOA funds, her secret meetings with inspectors who signed off on false reports. Every detail Margaret gathered wasn't just evidence, it was a weapon. One evening, Margaret slipped into the old HOA office. It had taken months to earn the janitor's trust, an old man tired of watching rich people lie. Together, they unlocked the storage room, where dusty boxes held years of financial records. Margaret scanned every page, marking the patterns. The embezzlement was clear, hundreds of thousands of dollars taken from homeowners through fake repair bills. Community improvement budgets and maintenance projects that never happened. She smiled faintly. For the first time in years, she felt power return to her hands. Over the next few days, Margaret prepared her final strike. She sent the entire file, documents, transfers, and proof of fraud to a local investigative journalist under a hidden name, Widow of Cedar Lake. The journalist, intrigued by the mysterious submission, started digging, and what he found was explosive. Within days, the story spread across social media. HOA president accused of massive fraud. Residents demand transparency as Cedar Lake scandal unfolds. The news channels picked it up. Helicopters hovered over the community, their cameras capturing the once perfect neighborhood now divided by fear and anger. Homeowners gathered in the park, shouting, demanding answers. Victoria appeared on TV, denying everything, her voice trembling behind her polished smile. "These are lies," she said. "A smear campaign." But even as she spoke, her own board members began to resign one by one. Margaret watched the chaos unfold from a distance. The streets that had once rejected her were now burning with shame. People who had called her unstable were now realizing she had been right all along. But she wasn't done yet. The journalist contacted her through an encrypted email begging to know who she was. "You've changed everything," he wrote. "If you come forward, we can make sure justice is done." But Margaret didn't reply. She had no interest in fame or gratitude. Her justice didn't need a name, only truth. As the investigation deepened, the police got involved. They raided the HOA office, seizing computers and hard drives. Victoria's face turned pale when officers appeared at her doorstep with a warrant. The cameras captured her walking out in handcuffs, a perfect image of downfall. The woman who once ruled through intimidation was now just another criminal caught by her own arrogance. Neighbors stood outside, whispering, some cheering quietly. And in the distance, standing beneath an old oak tree, Margaret watched. Her face revealed nothing, no smile, no tears. Only calm, complete silence. But that silence wasn't peace. Because even as Victoria's empire fell, the community began tearing itself apart. Homeowners accused one another of complicity, old rivalries resurfaced, and the unity that once made Cedar Lake shine now dissolved into lawsuits and distrust. Margaret had achieved her revenge, but not without cost. She drove past her old house that night. It was still standing, though empty and neglected. The new owners had moved out months ago, frightened by the scandal. She parked across the street, staring at the windows where she and her husband once sat, laughing over dinner. The light rain tapped gently against her windshield, and for the first time, she whispered into the dark, "It's almost over." In that moment, she realized something. Revenge doesn't end where you think it does. It lingers, shaping everything it touches. The world she destroyed would never be the same, and neither would she. The next morning, she left a single envelope at the doorstep of the local newspaper. Inside was a note. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about memory. The Widow of Cedar Lake by noon. The paper published the quote on the front page. The town was shaken, trying to guess who the mysterious widow was. Some thought she was an insider. Others said she was one of the victims. But only Margaret knew the truth, that she had already said her goodbyes. She packed her things that evening, ready to leave the town forever. But before she could, she received one last message, a news alert on her phone. Victoria Hale released on bail, denies charges, vows to expose her accuser. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she read. The storm wasn't done. The monster she brought down still had breath left, and that meant the story wasn't over. Outside, thunder rumbled across the horizon, rolling over the ruined streets of Cedar Lake. The rain began to fall harder. Margaret closed her bag, took one last look around her small rented room, and whispered, "Then let it end completely." She turned off the lights and stepped out into the night. The final act had just begun. The final return. The sun rose behind the wrecked walls of the once proud community, painting the air in shades of gold and regret. The HOA sign that once gleamed with authority now lay half-buried in the soil, its letters cracked and fading. Cedar Lake Estates, a name that once meant wealth and power, now whispered only of loss. The gates hung open, creaking like the breath of something long dead. Margaret stood by the remains of her old house, dressed in black, her posture calm but unyielding. The war she started was finally over. It wasn't a victory she celebrated. It was justice she had claimed, slow and deliberate, like a storm that remembers every insult before striking. Around her, the neighborhood looked nothing like the paradise she once dreamed of. The pristine lawns were overgrown, the perfect hedges twisted into wild chaos. For years, the HOA had crushed her spirit. But now it was gone, erased by its own greed and arrogance. The news had spread across the state. Local HOA dissolved after massive fraud scandal. Community president arrested. Anonymous donor saves dozens from eviction. The headlines didn't name her. They didn't need to. Margaret had always worked in silence. Her revenge wasn't about recognition. It was about restoration. She had become the ghost that haunted the system, one that no HOA could silence. Across the road, the new buyers of the community stared at her cautiously. They had heard rumors of the widow who fought back, the woman who brought down the powerful. Some said she was dangerous. Others called her a hero. She didn't correct any of them. She simply looked at the house, remembering every moment. The day the board mocked her for being just a widow, the night the police escorted her out, the letters of humiliation pinned to her door. Each memory burned, but not painfully anymore. They were embers, reminders of the fire she carried. She walked toward the lake behind the houses, the lake that once reflected the perfect symmetry of Cedar Lake Estates. Now it mirrored the sky, scattered and free. Her footsteps slowed as she reached the edge. There, waiting quietly, was a small brass box, the same one she had taken from the HOA office the night everything collapsed. Inside were the last remains of evidence, documents, bank transfers, a USB drive filled with secrets. She had held on to it, not as insurance, but as closure. Margaret opened the box, her reflection shimmering on the water's surface. Slowly, she dropped the papers into the lake, watching them dissolve one by one. With every sheet that sank, she felt her past slipping away. She wasn't the widow they mocked anymore. She wasn't the victim. She was the architect of her own freedom. Behind her, a voice called out softly. A local journalist, one of the few who had followed her story quietly over the months. "Mrs. Lane, people are asking, why didn't you reveal yourself as the one who took them down?" Margaret turned, her eyes calm, her lips barely curving into a smile. "Because revenge isn't about being seen," she said, her voice steady. "It's about being remembered." The journalist nodded, sensing the gravity of her words, and walked away, leaving her alone with the lake and the quiet morning wind. As the sun climbed higher, Margaret took one last look at the water and began walking back toward her car. An old, unremarkable vehicle that carried everything she owned. She didn't look back. Behind her, the town was already beginning to rebuild. The broken homes would find new families. The people who once turned against her would rebuild their lives. Learning that power doesn't belong to the loudest, it belongs to the one who endures. She drove away in silence, passing the cracked sign one last time. For a moment she thought of her husband, his laughter echoing through the walls of the home they had built together. She whispered to the wind, "It's done now." Somewhere deep inside her, the ache began to fade, replaced by a strange, quiet peace. The battle had ended not with violence, but with truth. She had become more than the woman the HOA tried to destroy. She had become the story people whispered about, the legend of the widow who fought back against a corrupt world and won. Weeks later, the community would change its name. The new board would promise transparency and fairness. But every time a homeowner walked past the lake at sunset, they said they could see her reflection, the woman in black, watching, guarding, ensuring no one ever abused power again. And perhaps that was true. Or perhaps it was just the wind remembering her. Either way, Margaret Lane had already left her mark, not in the soil of Cedar Lake, but in the hearts of everyone who learned what courage truly meant. Because in the end, her revenge wasn't destruction, it was rebirth.